Relief for the biotech space. The XBI ETF rallying for a second day in a row, its largest one-day gain in more than a year. But January wrapping up a terrible stretch for the group. The index down more than 16%, its biggest drop since 2018, and its third worst monthly performance ever. Our next guest says there could be opportunity in this beaten-down sector. Let's bring in Jaredholtz, healthcare equity strategist at Oppenheimer. Jared, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate it.
I read your note this morning, was fascinated by it in terms of how bad the metrics have been for this space, but then also got to the part where you wrote about funds that had been getting into the sector over the last months of 2021, and so there isn't much ammunition left for them to continue getting into this trade. Who is the buyer at this point?
Well, yeah, I think we have to look at other money managers to sort of start the party up a little bit. Long onlys, mutual funds, sovereign wealth funds, quant funds that have really been underweight the space for a while, and it's clearly been the right call. It's just that at these prices, with so many single securities moving down the same level or the same degree, there's a lot of opportunity if you have a longer term strategy. And I think after a 20% correction just in 1 month, and we were talking about whether this index was going to move higher at the start of the year, and it's been the worst start that we could have imagined. So I think money managers who have really not been heavily invested in biotech yet, could serve as the catalyst to move us back up here.
I mean, these are levels, Jared, you point out, that we haven't seen since Hillary Clinton talked about drug pricing. I mean, things are that bad. Is this the kind of sector that you can buy the ETF in, or is this the kind of sector where you have to dig in and understand the fundamentals of individual names?
Well, you might be able to do both here, because the XBI is almost representative of pretty much every other stock in the index at this point. You've had pretty much the bottom half of this group trade in tandem with the top half, meaning lower quality stocks trading to the same degree as the higher quality revenue generating in some cases, earnings generating in some cases stocks. So it's pretty much the same, sadly. I think you can probably play the index because some of the lower quality names, it's just so hard to see them go down even more. So I think today's move almost reflective of the fact that short covering stopped, maybe some covering took place today, maybe a little bit of nibbling on the margin. But I think you can probably do both. I mean, the higher quality names within biotech are probably ownable here, given the amount of destruction and value disintegration we've seen. But then again, you can probably buy the XBI here too, at least for a trade.
I want to get to your individual names. You've got 3 of them that you're bringing to us, starting with Horizon.
Well, yeah, I think Horizon's interesting here. Again, revenue generating, multi-billion-dollar top line company in eye disease that they've really crushed in terms of finding patients and generating significant sales from in only a couple of years. And this was $120, very recently, down as low as 80. It's come back along with the rest of the group today. But I think Horizon is worth a shot. Insmed is another one, revenue generating company, pipeline, real infrastructure, sales force, et cetera. And then Seattle Genetics as well. This is an oncology company with 5 marketed drugs, a host of others waiting in the clinic to be approved at some point over the next year or two. So I think those 3 kind of make sense, and they're kind of emblematic of what we've been talking about, trying to find legitimate enterprises that have traded just as poorly as those that do not have any of these attributes at all.
Jared, thank you. We appreciate it. Jaredholtz of Oppenheimer. Guy, where do you stand on this? I mean, as Jared had mentioned, even the low quality names, they're due for a bounce. This sort of gets back to the conversation we started the show with the ARC Innovation names. At some point, these things are going to bounce. The question is, do you want to step in here?
That's the thing. I mean, in IBB, obviously, I think IBB right now, 9% of it is now comprised by Moderna. But if you look at the sell-off, and we've talked about it, I didn't think you'd get down to the 160s, but here we are. I think IBB is worth a look. And CGen, SGEN, he just mentioned, it's really interesting. Morgan Stanley just upgraded the stock as well. And I think on valuation, you can make a pretty compelling case. So obviously, the XBI is a little bit of a different animal. IBB is the one that I look at. But I'll say this, CGen, one of the names that he brought to the table, is really compelling here. I think you're going to see more analysts start to upgrade the name.
Bonawyn, would you get in? Biotech?
I felt similar sentiments around Horizon. It's one of the cheapest in the group with one of the most robust gross margins, and it's a bit later stage, so it's a little less speculative. I mean, I can understand the buying the bounce, but you still want to make sure you're at the top tier of the sector or subsector that you're involved in, and I think Horizon fits the bill there.
Tim, very, very rough year for biotech investor. What would you do here?
Yeah, and I think I would stick with quality, and I would stick with the lowest multiple names and the ones with the most cash and the most defensive. And to me, that's Regeneron. It's potentially Gilead. Regeneron certainly has fared well through COVID, so their COVID A/B cocktail is seen as the preventative, status quo. I think if you look at their future in oncology, it's very optimistic. They've had a lot of progress. They've got $9 billion to spend on internal research. They are doing just that, and it's 9.5 times forward. So our audience knows, we talk about this all the time, the difference between the XBI and the IBB. And I just think in the IBB, you have a lot more defense, and Regeneron has outperformed its peer group, and Moderna is the reason why the IBB is underperformed. So I think you can't paint them all with the same brush. I think Regeneron looks great.